Well, John Longworth joins us, former Director General of the British Chambers of Commerce. He now is co-chair of Leave Means Leave. John, good afternoon.
Hello.
Now, given what we're talking about here, sort of an immigration policy from the EU after Brexit, what do you think of what you've heard so far about what the government seem to plan to do? And in terms of your previous job at the British Chambers of Commerce, what do you think business is going to think of this?
OK, well, I'm going to disappoint you slightly by saying that I agree with much of what both of you have said so far, but there are some very important points that we need to take into account.
I think we're going to have to rely on callers to disagree with us, aren't we?
But there are some very important points. I mean, first of all, the first duty of government is defence, security and the control of borders. And amongst other things, it was one of the things that people voted to have control of borders. It's perfectly reasonable to have visa waiver systems in place for visitors. I mean, many countries around the world do that. The USA does it, for example, for visitors from the UK. But for anybody else, people who are settling in the UK or are coming here to work, there needs to be proper checks at the borders and there needs to be a proper work permit system. There's no question that the migration issue is inexorably linked with the economy, but it's not all one way. I mean, it is a fact, for example, that that every migrant that comes into the UK into a low-skilled job costs UK taxpayers around £3,500 a year in subsidies. And at the same time, of course, is denying jobs to the 829,000 unemployed under 25s in the UK.
Yeah, but a lot of the migrants that you're talking about come here because employers cannot find British people to do those jobs.
Well, so they say. I mean, the amount of
why would they lie about it?
Because it's in their interest to do so. The amount of training that takes place in the UK has fallen off dramatically in the last decades. And the amount of investment that takes place to substitute for labour has fallen off also, which, as a consequence of which, we're now developing a low-skill, low-wage, low-productivity economy. And actually putting some pressure on employers to train people to invest in substituting for employing labour, and also, of course, then leading to higher wages, would actually be good for the economy because it would lead to a high-wage, high-productivity economy, which is what we want. And there are a variety of ways you can do that. I mean, you could actually put limits on the amount of people coming in. I don't particularly think that's a good idea. I prefer market mechanisms. It's perfectly possible, for example, to charge sufficiently high amounts for visas that employers then have to make a decision. Is it cheaper to bring somebody in or is it cheaper to train somebody?
But why should employers be penalised in that way?
Because it's good for the economy as a whole. What you're actually getting is employers effectively feathering their own nest, particular types of organisations, big corporates in particular, at the expense of the rest of the economy and at the expense of the people of the country who are not getting a fair crack at being able to be employed, trained, and actually have a reasonable income. And don't forget, higher incomes, providing it doesn't drive inflation, is net neutral economically, because what it does, it feeds back into the economy in terms of consumer demand and actually ends up with growth in the economy.
But if you're a fruit farmer in Lincolnshire, for example, and you have seasonal need for temporary employees, and you've always had them from Eastern Europe in the past, you would obviously there will have to be some sort of permit system, but you wouldn't want to charge a huge amount to somebody like that because you really would be penalising them. Then you'd probably put them out of business.
You'd have a waiver system for seasonal labour. I mean, we always had seasonal labour in the UK coming from overseas, even before we joined the European Union. But they then went home at the end of the season. And that's the difference, that they don't go home now necessarily. Can become a burden on public services and in-work credits if they're in work. And also they repatriate that money back to their homelands in the European Union, which is damaging to our country, which is not in a good place.
John, thank you.